I think one of the reasons why that song resonates with so many people, especially I know it does for me, is because of the tension that it raises. And there's this tension, I know it's true in your life, and it's certainly true in my life. There's a tension between this life that we thought we were going to live and the life that we're actually living. When we're young, we have these dreams about our lives. We daydream. We think we're going to, do this or do that or marry this person or that person, and we're going to do this. And whatever it might be, we have these dreams. And then what happens to those dreams? Well, answer is life happens, right? Stuff happens. And all of a sudden, those dreams that we have for our lives, they get dashed. They get dashed against the rocks of divorce, or they get dashed against the rocks of depression, or they get dashed against the rocks of disease, or they get dashed against the rocks of debilitating debt, or they get dashed against the rocks of you fill in the blank. And when that happens, there's this disconnect. There's this disconnect that leads us to those voices in our head that the song was talking about. Those voices that start questioning our identity, who we are, our worth, our dignity. Do we have any value? Those voices that start getting us to question even who God is. Is God really real? Does God really exist? Does God really care? Is God really good? Is God really sovereign over all the events of our world and over the events of my life? And we ask those kinds of questions because of this disconnect between the life we dreamed of and the life that we're actually living. And it doesn't matter whether you're a follower of Jesus or you're not a follower of Jesus, we all experience that kind of tension and that kind of disconnect. And I think for Christians, and I'm a follower of Jesus, and I know many of you are at all of our campuses, I think for us who are followers of Jesus, that disconnect in dealing with that kind of disappointment is even greater. Permission to be honest with you? Yeah. I think it's greater for us who are followers of Jesus because we expect more of God. I mean, come on, we're in church. Like the nicest last weekend before it snows, we're in church. And reread our Bibles once in a while. And we give money in the offering bag when it's passed once in a while. And we get out of the seat and we serve once in a while. Come on, if anybody, this is true. You know this is true. You know you think this way, and you better believe I think this way. If anybody should live the dream life, it should be us. It should be us at all of our campuses. It should be us. And then when that dream life doesn't happen like we thought it was going to happen, again, there's this disconnect. Thus the tension. Thus the voices in our heads. And again, for us Christians, we even know the promises of God, right? And we go to church, we hear the preacher preach and give all these promises, or we tune into KTIS, Christian radio, and we hear the DJs throw out all the promises in the Bible, the Jeremiah 29:11s, the Hebrews 13:5s, the John 10:10s. You say, okay, Pastor, I don't know those. Well, here they are. Jeremiah 29:11, for I know the plans I have for you, says the Lord. They're plans for good and not disaster, to give you a future and a hope. Boy, there's a promise, right? There's a promise. Hebrews 13:5, God says, I will never fail you. I will never abandon you. Woo. John 10:10, Jesus promising us a rich and satisfying life. And maybe you're sitting in one of the chairs at one of our campuses going, well, I'm not sure I'm getting in on that. I'm not sure this is the rich and satisfying life here. I'm not sure this is the good future, God. I'm not sure about all this. And God, if you're here with me, I don't really see you. I don't really sense you. Did you ever feel that way? I know you do. The question isn't whether you feel that way. The question is, how do we deal with it? How do we deal with that kind of disconnect? I know you experience it. I know that I experience it well too. And those are those voices that come into our head, again questioning things. And that's why I'm so glad that you're here as we launch into this brand new series this weekend on this life of this Old Testament character named Joseph. Because believe me, he was a dreamer. He had no doubt he envisioned something for his life. And as we're going to see in these weeks that we have together, we're going to do this for 7 weeks, by the way. We're going to look at chapter after chapter after chapter of his life where what he envisioned and what he dreamed didn't happen. But how he navigated the disappointment is why we're going to focus in on his story for the next 7 weeks. Because we're going to learn things together. Profound lessons about life. But before we do anything, I want to give you just a real quick overview of what happened to what happened to Joseph. My guess is you know a little bit about Joseph from the Old Testament, but just to give you a real quick summary of some of the things that marked his story, here they are. A messed up dad. How many of you have a messed up dad? Don't put your hand up. I did not ask that question last night because my daughter was in the audience. I was not going to ask that question last night because she would have stood up, both hands in the air. Messed up dad, siblings who ganged up against him, abandonment, being sold into slavery, falsely accused of attempted rape, imprisonment though he was innocent, broken promises, dashed dreams, family drama, and lots more family drama. And if I added one more, I'd say lots more family drama. There is just a ton of family drama going on. And if you can relate to any of these things, any of them, you're going to absolutely love this series on this life of this guy named Joseph. Even if you can't relate to any of it at all, you're still going to get so much out of this series. And so, again, I'm just really delighted that you are spending some time at Crossroads this weekend. So we're going to get right to his story now. It's in the Old Testament. It's in the very first book of the Bible, which is called the book of Genesis. Genesis simply means beginnings. And I'm going to invite you to grab your Bible app or your Bible, B-I-B-L-E, and go ahead and turn to that very first book of the Bible and go to Genesis chapter 37. All right? Genesis 37. Easy to find. Now, when we get there, let me just say, we're going to pick up the story with Joseph at the age of 17 years of age. And if you've ever been a 17-year-old or you have a 17-year-old, you know that maybe they're not the most mature at that time. I know I wasn't. So let's pick up the story. So Jacob, this is the dad, Jacob settled again in the land of Canaan, where his father had lived as a foreigner. This is the account of Jacob and his family. When Joseph, here's our character, was 17 years old, he often tended his father's flocks. He worked for his half-brothers, the sons of his father's wives, Bilhah and Zilpah. All right? But Joseph reported to his father some of the bad things his brothers were doing. Jacob loved Joseph more than any of his other children because Joseph had been born to him in his old age. So one day, Jacob had a special gift made for Joseph, a beautiful robe. But his brothers, hear this, his brothers hated Joseph because their father loved him more than the rest of them. They couldn't say a kind word to him. Now we're going to stop right here for just a moment, because if I asked you right now to turn to your neighbor sitting near you and just share what's wrong thus far in the story, you'd have a lot to talk about, right? Now, we're not going to do that because we know you introverts hate that. You hate that. So we're not going to do it. But if I asked you right now, what's wrong thus far in the story, you could probably note several things, right? Well, first of all, Jacob has more than one wife. Is this a good thing or a bad thing? Some of you are thinking, it's bad. It's bad. It's a bad thing. You don't have to think about it. It's a bad thing. Yeah, and the other thing that's wrong in the story is the youngest son, Joseph, what does he do? He tattles. He goes and tattles on all his brothers to daddy. Not a good thing. But the other thing that we see happening here in the story, which is really, really bad, is that his dad, Joseph's dad, is showing him what? Starts with an F. Favoritism. Yeah, favoritism in a big way. And that favoritism is on display every single day because daddy gave Joseph what? A coat of many colors. Yeah. Now, I didn't bring one to wear. Maybe some weekend I'll wear one of these coats of many colors. By the way, it's definitely purple. It's not green. Everybody just calm down. All right. Actually, I don't know what color it was. But anyway, let me just say it was a coat of many colors. And the fact that his dad gave him this coat of many colors and he wore it every day was another just reminder, blatant reminder to all the other siblings that Joseph was the favored son. And I just want to say, and you already know this, but I just need to say this out loud. This is not a good parenting technique to show favoritism of one sibling, one child over the other. And all this leads to, and some of you know this because you've experienced this in your own home, but all it leads to is resentment and anger and bitterness. And that's certainly true right here in this particular story. For 17 years, these other brothers have watched this whole thing evolve. Their dad showing favoritism to the youngest of them. And there's kind of like, I guess the best way I could describe it here is there's like a powder keg sitting in the middle of this family room, of this home. And it hasn't gone off yet, but we can kind of just see something about to happen here. Let's pick the story up, verse 5. One night, Joseph had a dream. By the way, true story. I had a dream last night. You just usually don't remember my dreams, but I remember last night, and I have no idea why this came into my head. You know how dreams are weird? The dream I had last night was I was supposed to go baptize Aaron Rodgers, and I said, there's no way I'm doing it. I refused to baptize Aaron Rodgers, all right? So pray for me, all right? I shouldn't have shared that. Just keep that to yourselves, all right? Just keep that to yourselves. Don't tell anybody. Anyway, so one night Joseph had a dream. It's different than my dream. Joseph had a dream. And when he told his brothers about it, they hated him more than ever. Listen to this dream, he said, and here it was. We were out in the field tying up bundles of grain. Suddenly, my bundle stood up, and your bundles gathered around and bowed low to mine, before mine. All right, what do you think about this dream? Worse than my dream. Yeah, worse than my dream. Joseph should never have shared this dream. I mean, he's already the pampered one, and now he's the pompous one, right? I mean, he's already hated by his brothers. He's wearing around, this coat of many colors, his favorite son. And all of a sudden, he's saying, and you're all going to bow down before me. You remember the powder keg I talked to you about? I think the match maybe has been lit here. Let's pick it up. Verse 8. His brothers responded, so you think you will be our king, do you? Do you actually think you will reign over us? And they hated him all the more because of his dreams and the way he talked about them. And again, I think the match is lit here. The powder keg is about to explode. Now, we're not going to look at the next couple of verses, but he has more dreams, more snooty and snobby dreams about him being all, superior to all of his other brothers. And we're going to pick the story back up. We're going to skip down to verse 12. Here's what happens. Soon after this, Joseph's brothers went to pasture their father's flocks at Shechem. When they had been gone for some time, Jacob said to Joseph, Dad saying to favored son, he said, your brothers are pasturing the sheep at Shechem. Get ready, and I will send you to them. I'm ready to go, Joseph replied. Go and see how your brothers and the flocks are getting along, Jacob said. Then come back and bring me a report. So Jacob sent him on his way, and Joseph traveled to Shechem from their home in the valley of Hebron. Now, I want to just stop right now, and I want to give you a little perspective. You know what's going on here in this family. You know the growing resentment and the growing bitterness and the growing rage and anger that these brothers have toward Joe, the youngest one. And now what is Daddy doing? Daddy is sending this son, whom they hate, to go check up on them. And all I want to say here to all of you at all of our campuses is, Daddy is dense. Daddy is dense. You've got a clueless 17-year-old, but now you've got a dense dad. And I say that not to be funny in the least bit. I say that because it's true. And I think I also just need to say this for whomever needs to hear it. If you've got an elephant in your family room like this family had, you got to deal with it. You got to escort the elephant out of the family room. You mom, you dad, you parents together, You got to do whatever needs to be done if there's this kind of a problem festering in your home. Or if you're a leader in some business. Can I just speak to leaders for a moment? If you're a leader in some business and you're not dealing with the problem that's staring you in the face, you're not leading. In fact, if you're not dealing with the problem in the boardroom or the problem in your family room, you, over time, become the problem. And this is the problem right now with Jacob here, the father. He's not seeing what he should see. He's not dealing with it, what he should deal with. And we've got a situation here that is going to get very, very ugly. And I just want to say again, there's a tension going on here. And this tension was not being dealt with. And because it wasn't being dealt with, it's no surprise what we see next. When Joseph's brothers saw him coming, they recognized him in the distance. He had the big robe on. As he approached, they made plans to what? To kill him. Yeah. Here comes the dreamer, they said. Come on, let's kill him and throw him into one of these cisterns, one of these empty pits. We can tell our father, a wild animal has eaten him. Then we'll see what becomes of his dreams. But when Reuben heard of their scheme, he came to Joseph's rescue. Let's not kill him, he said. Why should we shed any blood? Let's just throw him into this empty cistern. He's kind of the Mother Teresa in the family. Anyway, let's just throw him into the empty cistern here in the wilderness. Then he'll die without our laying any hands on him. Reuben was secretly planning to rescue Joseph and return him to his father. So when Joseph arrived, his brothers ripped off the beautiful robe he was wearing. Then they grabbed him and threw him into the cistern. Now, the cistern was empty. There was no water in it. I want to stop right here. I want to interrupt the story again because I just want to make an observation here. And the observation I want to make is a simple one. And the simple observation is this. Joseph never saw this coming. He didn't wake up that morning thinking, my brothers are going to try to kill me today. He had no idea what was going on. He struts into that scene with his, fancy robe on, not having any clue what was about to happen. And I bring this up because some of you know the feeling. Something has happened to you. Something that was unexpected. Something you never saw it coming. It came out of nowhere. And now you find yourself free-falling. Or you find yourself at the bottom of a cistern. At the bottom of an empty pit, kind of wondering what in the world just happened to me. Maybe it was a pregnancy that turned into a miscarriage. Or maybe it was a job that was suddenly eliminated. Or maybe it was a doctor's report that came out of nowhere, just a simple procedure or a simple physical, and all of a sudden the prognosis is just, whoa, it's cancer, or it's heart disease, or something else. Or maybe for you, it was a suicide, a friend's suicide. Or for you, it was a death in your family. Never saw it coming. Or maybe for you, it's an eviction notice, or someone's suing you, or you fill in the blank. Friends, this is called life. Sometimes it just comes out. We never see it coming. And all of a sudden, we go from favored to flat on our face or flat on our back. We go from being at the pinnacle of success to all of a sudden now being in the pits. And it happens just like that, doesn't it? And this is exactly where Joseph finds himself in this story. He never saw this coming. He had no idea, and all of a sudden, he wakes up and here he is. Down, 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 thud. And that's where we pick up the story. Verse 24. Then, just as they were sitting down to eat, the brothers who just threw him into the pit, they looked up and saw a caravan of camels in the distance coming toward them. It was a group of Ishmaelite traders taking a load of gum, balm, and aromatic resin from Gilead down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What will we gain by killing our brother? We'd have to cover up the crime, fingerprints, all that stuff. CSI will be around. Instead of hurting him, let's sell him to those Ishmaelite traders. After all, he is our brother, our own flesh and blood." And his brothers agreed. So when the Ishmaelites, who were Midianite traders, came by, Joseph's brothers pulled him out of the cistern and sold him to them for 20 pieces of silver. And the traders took him to Egypt. And that's kind of how the end of the chapter goes. The good news for Joseph is he's out of the cistern. The bad news for Joseph is he's been sold to some traders, and they're going to trade him or sell him to become a slave for 20 pieces of silver. Not a lot of money back then even. The sons then, they concoct this plan, right? I mean, they got to go back and tell dad something. So what do? They take the robe, they dip it in some animal's blood, and they FedEx it back to dad with a little note, hey, something happened to Joe. You know, we feel bad, but he's dead, you know. And dad mourns, and dad wails, and dad grieves, and he cries and everything. And that's the end. That's the end of chapter 37. And that's where we're going to kind of pick up the story next week. You will not believe what happens in chapter 38. He gets sold to a high-ranking government official of Egypt. The guy's name was Potiphar. And you won't believe what happens next to Joseph. You won't believe it. It involves Mrs. Potiphar. And oh boy, is it quite a story. You're going to have to come back to hear it next week. Do not read it. Do not read it. Do not read chapter 38 before next weekend when you come back. All right, but let me just look up here. Some of you are already reading, and I know. No. Look at me. Look. All campuses, look at me right now. All right, let me just tell you something. If you come back, which I know most of you won't, but if you come back next weekend, I'm using reverse psychology. If you come back next weekend, and if you hang with us throughout this series, you're going to learn a lesson that I have been learning in studying this life of Joseph. You're going to learn a lesson that's going to sustain you whether you're up on the mountaintop or down in a valley. Whether you're the favored one or you're flat on your back. Whether you're on the pinnacle of success at school or at work, at home, whatever, or whether you're in a pit somewhere. You're going to learn a lesson that is going to sustain you throughout your life. And I'm going to share the lesson with you today, and then we're going to unpack it for the next 7 weeks. But here's the lesson. God gets us through stuff, and God uses stuff for our good. Let me read it again. God gets us through stuff, and God uses stuff for our good. Now, you may not believe that, and that's okay. But if you come back, and I hope you will, we're going to see this unfold in Joseph's life over and over and over again. Stuff happens. Bad stuff happens. But Joseph finds out that God is there. And then Joseph, because of his attitude and the way he navigated through all the stuff, and this is what we're going to learn how to do better, Joseph doesn't just endure it, he actually thrives. He actually succeeds. And it's an amazing, 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 amazing story. And I don't know where you're at right now, whether you're on top of the world or in the deepest valley. I don't know if you're in the pinnacle or the pits, or you're favored or you're flat. I don't know where you're at, but here's what I do know. Wherever you find yourself today, God is there. You will never find yourself somewhere, and some of you are someplace you don't want to be, but you will never find yourself somewhere where God is not. And since some of you are free falling right now, and I know it, I went through all the prayer requests from last weekend, by the way, just so you know. Some of you are free falling right now. You're just like tumbling down, and you need a parachute right now. You need a parachute. So what I found, and I want to close with this, I found a parachute promise in the Bible from Moses himself. Moses is the one who compiled and edited and wrote the book of Genesis, for example. And here's the parachute promise right out of Deuteronomy chapter 31. So be strong and courageous. Do not be afraid. Some of you need to hear this. Do not be afraid and do not panic before them. For the Lord your God, look, will personally go ahead of you. He will neither fail you nor abandon you. Wow. There it is. Some of you came to church, you weren't even sure why you came. You came for that parachute promise right there. God wants you to hang on right now. Because if you hang on right now, you're going to find out that God gets us through stuff, and God uses stuff for our good. Will you believe that? Will you hang on to that parachute promise? And will you come back next week for week 2 of this series on the life of Joseph? It was all a dream. I hope you will.